everyone. So this is how you do embossing for handprints and footprints. You will find a box very similar to this, or we are going to put together something in the emergency department that's very just basic, but you will have all the tools. So this is our pediatric embossing handprint kit. So there's all these different things in the box that you are gonna want. And typically I get everything out just so you guys you know, have everything ready. And if you're going into the room, you don't have to take the whole box with you. Typically these things I'll get to in a minute, but these are the heat guns. I keep them outside of the room because they do make a little bit of a loud noise, more like a hair dryer, and it can be kind of you know, it's just can change the mindset in the room. So
obtrusive?
It could be obtrusive, yes. And so I usually heat it outside of the room, but also be away from like other areas that might impact care and things like that. So it's just kind of being thoughtful about where you do it. You will want either canvases or like cardstock, and we offer different color prints for families. They get to choose the color of paper and the color of embossing powder that they want for their child's handprint or footprint. And I'm really gonna just do the basics because that's probably all you're gonna have time for, and that's okay. We do typically also offer families to add like siblings' hands and other family members' handprints, but it might not happen, and that's okay. They can always add it with like acrylic paint at home because that's more permanent. But remember that acrylic paint is permanent, so you don't want anybody to touch their clothes. But they can do that at home. And the great thing about embossing, so this is just a sample on the canvas, is that they can take these to like Kinko's, especially the ones on cardstock, and they can make colored prints. So then you just do a couple for the family, and they can take it to those other printing places and get copies for other family if they want. Okay, so you need certain things. You need this clear ink. So the great thing about this is it's very clear, and this is what goes on the child's hand. Thank you. And these bottles are easy to open. You don't need a lot for the handprints, and I would just pour minimal amounts because you can always add more. And I just do a little bit to start, and you can always add more if you need more later. And please make sure to put the tops back on and close it tightly and put it back in the bags. It's really important that we be mindful about keeping things orderly and nice so that if there's multiple kids coming in or we need this, then it's just ready for the next person. And it's all set up really nice in our kit. So then there's all these different paintbrushes, and I use the sponge, actually, oops, a bigger one, for doing the handprints or footprints. And these can be thrown away, so just throw it away after you're done. This can be thrown away. It doesn't need to be reused. So then, once the family has picked a color for their child, oh, I already have it out. I'm just gonna do a small one, but you don't need a whole lot for their hand. You also actually probably before you start this whole process, you want to have them pick out their embossing color. So probably in the emergency department, we'll have like a few choices for you guys in your kit, because we're going to talk about getting one just for you guys. But we have tons in here. So there's all these different options. Some are more popular than others, but let the family pick their color for their child. And I'm going to do a really pretty like white silver. You also want to be mindful about like the color of the page. So if it's obviously like white or lighter, you're not gonna be able to see the embossing as well. So you might want like a darker color for a light color and vice versa. And then this can be reused. So just, and it's not like anything in isolation, it doesn't really matter because it's not touching the patient's hand or anything. So just to be remembering that. And then I get these other things ready because we're gonna pour the rest of the embossing powder into this and just pour it back into the bottle. So I have all these just little things ready. And also this tiny little paintbrush to then make things a little bit more defined on the picture. So this is what's in the kit. Of course, with living or patients that are awake, it's different than if they're not conscious or in the process of dying or dead. Rigor mortis sets in quite quickly, and so if they have died, you want to try and do handprints fairly quickly if you have the coroner's approval. And you have to get all those things, especially in the ED. So make sure you're working with whoever you need to get that. So you don't need a ton, but you want to make sure that you're covering the fingertips and make sure, and you can see, I would recommend that you just practice on a regular piece of printer paper, and then just wiggle your arm like you're kind of a little bit more, because those our patients we're going to work with are they're not as coherent, then way more stiff. So typically what I do is I start with the palm and do one finger at a time. Okay, just relax your hand. Pretend like you're not living. And then I just gently push the hand, and usually I'm talking to the patient out loud so that families, can hear me and the patient, and just say, I'm really sorry, Emily, I'm pushing a little bit hard. We're just going to push down a little bit more, and we're doing a little art project. And then the best way to get a person's hand off is just by pulling up with their middle finger. So, as you can see, this print turned out quite well because she is living and not so stiff. The best way to get this ink off our patient's hands is with baby wipes. So here you go. And then, of course, you can wash your hands, but this is the best way. Sometimes I will do these prints with gloves on. Typically I do, just because it can get on your hands and you can start smudging it a little bit. And it does take some practice, so you guys are obviously gonna practice. Mm-hmm. Then from here, the print is on here, and you can just pour the whole thing of the embossing powder on there. So don't be shy. And now my hands are a little wet. So from here, you can see that it's not covering the whole thing, so I just move it around to make sure it's covering the print.
Full-on art project.
It is. That's why I just, I do tell patients and families it's kind of like an art project. It's and it's a great way to just remember their child and have a piece of them forever. We've gone back and forth on what that might mean to families. Would this mean that they're just thinking of when they came to the hospital, but lots of families really want these pieces. Mm-hmm. It's called legacy building and memory making, and families really cherish these.
My veterinarian did it for my cat, unbeknownst to me, and sent it to me later, and I was overjoyed to receive it.
That is so sweet.
It's on my bedstand right now.
Oh, I love that.
I do too.
So once you pour that back in on this printer paper, then just pour it back in here because we will reuse it. So try and, I spilt a little bit of it.
Sure did. I seen it.
But that's okay. But these things are really expensive. They're like, these bottles are, so much per bottle, and so we want to just reuse them. And I have it all over the floor. I do.
Mm-hmm, I seen it.
So then, as you can see, since I did probably touch a little bit of the ink, we have a couple of these spots around. So this is where this nice little paintbrush comes in. sometimes I've pushed hard enough that I make like double fingers or things, but it's really an easy way to make your, like you can make the fingers again and make them look like fingers, but then just slowly, I'm usually really precise. I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to these. I just want them to be perfect. So you can always do it again if it doesn't turn out the way you want it. That is, I mean, really the beauty of these.
Would you do this outside the room, or would you clean it up in the room?
I'd clean it up outside the room, just cause, but sometimes I do it in there. It depends on your space and what you have available. Cause if you bring it outside of the ER room and like there's hardly any spaces for you to do it. But it depends on if there's still a bunch of people in the room, does the family want to be involved, and things like that. Sometimes siblings really get hands-on too, or the family members, and I think it's a beautiful way for them to start the grieving process, so that's really something to think about as well. And talking about their child if they feel like it. Sometimes it brings like opportunities for just moments to laugh and talk or cry about their child or their favorite moments with them. It can be really beautiful. So just remembering, in every situation with every child and family is different.
Would you want to draw the thumb in since half my thumb's missing, or did you just leave it? Okay.
No, because the thing, and sometimes like, I think with my palm, some palms are really more indented. So, but if a lot of it is missing, like I did that with Emma last week, and it seemed to be missing, I did a little bit more ink
Like
and
the
put it on.
Arch on a foot almost.
Yeah,
Everyone-
arches on foot. Like sometimes you might not even get anything, but that's okay. But if it looks like you're missing like a ton of the print, then I would just do it again, and that's okay. So then you have your heat gun, and if you're working with the kiddos, siblings, or something like that, I always say this is where we get to do some of the magic and seal the print. So you're gonna see, don't get too close, you want it to be like an inch away, but this is where you're gonna see it start to change. And you wanna really make sure that it's all sealed, because if not, it brushes off.
What do you mean by all sealed?
Heat it up. So right now it's warming it up enough that it seals it. And that's what embossing is. It melts it to like, it's no longer the powder form. This one you don't see change as much, but you can see it, which I should have showed you. If you get too close, it will like kind of melt it and bubble it, so you don't want to get like really, really close. And it can take away from the print. But just slowly go down and you can see it changing. And then the next thing I do, and I should have left some so you could see it, is just go around and like see if there's any that doesn't look sealed. And I usually take this back around one more time and make sure like the edges are usually kind of sometimes missed. But I just take it back around and make sure. So this is where you get to practice and see how that changes. But then it's finished. Easy peasy. So that takes you only a couple minutes, but it does take a lot of time with our patients because the process is just a little different when they're not, when they're more stiff and other people might be involved. But having two people help you is key. Also, if you're using this cardstock, you probably want to put it on like a clipboard because it's not very, it's not sturdy, and canvases are easy. You can just do them without a clipboard, but you need to have like the print kind of tilted up. Usually the patient's laying down, so you know, doing a flat print is not even possible. So you're holding up the clipboard, and then someone's holding the clipboard, and then another person's helping with the hand, or you know, it can be a little challenging, and that's what takes quite a bit of time. So that is it.